BFF project aims to create qualitative educational strategies, resources, and activities as a support for adult educators who work with adult learners coping with ADHD in order to improve their learning process, acquisition of knowledge, and development of needed skills and competencies. The main idea of the project has as its base the benefits of neuropedagogy and how these can be transposed into educational strategies and practical resources in order to facilitate both the teaching and the learning process of adults coping with ADHD. The direct target group is focused on adult educators, also adult educational centers, and on the other side, the indirect target group follows adult learners, especially the ones coping with ADHD. Through our project, we aim to create 2 intellectual outputs, which will serve as support for adult educators and adult educational centers in their daily work. We consider that the intellectual outputs are complementary. The first one, online course for adult educators, represents the theoretical part, and the second one, handbook of activities, represents the practical part, which adult educators can directly implement with their learners. The activities of the handbook will be created on the basics of neuropedagogy, and each activity will be designed in order to help adult learners to develop and improve their soft skills needed to integrate in the current fast-changing labor market. Therefore, the handbook will not only serve as support for adult educators to improve their teaching process, but will also benefit the adult learners from several perspectives: better understanding of the topics and development of soft skill. The objectives of our project are the following: to provide educational strategies based on neuropedagogy in order to support adult educators in their work with learners coping with ADHD, to equip adult educators with the needed knowledge, competences, and tools to make use of the benefits of neuropedagogy. To create sustainable educational resources adapted to the real needs of adult educators and adult learners. To foster inclusion and personalized learning into adult educational centers.
Hello and welcome to our today's webinar called Understanding Learning Difficulties.
This webinar is part of project Brain-Friendly Forms of Education for ADHD Learners, which is funded under the Erasmus Plus program. So, what are learning difficulties exactly? Learning difficulties are a group of disorders involving significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities. These disorders are very specific to the individual and vary significantly between individuals and are due to central nervous system dysfunction. So, what are the exact characteristics of learning difficulties? According to DSM-5, those are difficulties in writing, reading, arithmetic, math, or reasoning skills which occur during school years. There are possible problems when remembering facts, thinking clearly, or writing well. In addition to this, academic skills may be below average. For example, a child with dyslexia will experience a greater degree of reading difficulties and need to expend greater effort to read than children without dyslexia. Thirdly, those kind of difficulties begin during school years. And last of all, another disorder such as developmental or neurological issue must not better explain the symptoms. What are the types of learning difficulties? First of all, we have ADHD, which is a disorder that includes difficulty staying focused and paying attention. Also, difficulty controlling behavior and hyperactivity. Secondly, we have dyscalculia, which is a specific learning difficulty that affects a person's ability to understand numbers and learn math facts. Thirdly, we have dysgraphia, which is a specific learning difficulty that affects a person's handwriting ability and fine motor skills. Additionally, we have dyslexia, which is a learning difficulty that affects reading and related language-based processing skills. Dyspraxia, on the other hand, is a disorder which causes problems with movement and coordination, as well as language and speech. Nonverbal learning difficulties include trouble interpreting nonverbal cues like facial expressions or body language and poor coordination. And lastly, we have processing disorders, which involve difficulty in processing information.
According to statistics, in Europe, 15% of the population is dealing with dyslexia or some sort of learning disorder. From that 15%, about 9 to 12 are navigating through life in a lot of non-dyslexia-friendly situations. Meanwhile, large numbers of people within that 15% are suffering from other disorders as well. According to the European Dyslexia Association, between 20 and 40% of persons with dyslexia are also having dyscalculia. 20 to 55% of persons with developmental language disorder are dyslexic. 10 to 20% of persons with dyslexia are having an anxiety disorder. 2 to 14% of persons with dyslexia are having a depression, and between 8 and 18% of persons with dyslexia are having an ADHD.
So, here are some facts about ADHD as a learning difficulty. ADHD doesn't affect the ability to learn skills such as reading, writing, or mathematics. However, some effects of ADHD, such as difficulty concentrating, can lead to some challenges in learning. The symptoms of this condition and their effects on education may include reduced executive function, which includes harder to plan and coordinate thoughts and actions, hyperactivity, trouble paying attention, disorganization, impulsivity, and lack of attention to detail. So, what exactly is the difference between a learning difficulty and a learning disability? Although the terms are used interchangeably, there are some significant differences, such as students with learning difficulties underachieve academically due to sensory impairment, behavioral, psychological, or emotional issues, high absenteeism, ineffective instruction, or inadequate curricula. These students can achieve success once provided with programs that incorporate appropriate support and evidence-based instruction. However, in contrast, students with learning disabilities have difficulties in specific academic areas as a result of an underlying neurodevelopmental disorder, the origin of which includes an interaction of genetic, epigenetic, and environmental factors. One defining feature of a specific learning disability is that the difficulty continues to exist despite appropriate instruction and intervention.
And now let's introduce one more definition: special educational needs. What does SEN mean and how does it relate to learning difficulties? According to the European Agency for Special Needs and Inclusive Education, special educational needs, also known as SEN, is a construct that countries usually define within their legislation. These definitions are then used to identify, assess, and make provision for learners with different needs, including recognized disabilities, in different ways. Special or additional needs should not be seen as the result of in-child factors, but rather a discrepancy between what a system of schooling ordinarily provides and what the child needs to support their learning. Students with learning difficulties often are recognized as students with SEN. The evidence suggests that any differences in outcomes for children with SEN between special and mainstream schools are small, but tend to favor mainstream schools in terms of educational attainments and social integration. Students with learning difficulties and disorders are less likely to meet the same educational standards as their peers without purposeful interventions and ongoing support. Children who are not learning and responding to instructions at the same level as their peers need additional intervention to provide an opportunity to catch up. These students may also benefit from additional classroom supports and adjustments, which will allow them to better engage in the curriculum and demonstrate their knowledge and understanding in the least restrictive manner, particularly while their literacy and numeracy skills are still developing.
What are some additional issues that students with learning difficulties face? Well, they may have low self-esteem as a result of the poor academic results they achieve at school. They tend to be less effective in engaging with others, which often leads to difficulties accepting others. In addition to this, they may feel powerless, they may have more difficulty coping with the world, and they do not feel that they are in control. Additionally, developing a positive self-esteem is highly desirable. So, how can those students achieve success? Researchers in the USA have identified factors that contribute to the success and well-being of individuals with learning difficulties. Some of those are self-awareness, which is the ability to recognize and understand their strengths and difficulties; proactivity, which includes making connections and feeling positive; perseverance, which is an ability to pursue their chosen path despite their difficulties; goal settings, which includes setting realistic and attainable goals and understanding the process necessary to reach these goals; presence and use of effective support systems such as family, teachers, and others, and effective coping and emotion regulation strategies, coping with stress. So, what is the situation in other countries? First, let's start with Bulgaria.
The group of students with learning difficulties is covered by the Preschool and School Education Act's legal definition to special educational needs. These are educational needs of a child or student which may occur in the following situation: sensory disorders, physical disorders, multiple disorders, intellectual difficulties, language speech disorders, specific disorders of ability to learn, disorder of autistic spectrum, emotional disorders. Children and students with special educational needs are provided with additional support for personal development. It is provided by kindergartens, schools, personal development support centers, and specialized service units. Additional support is provided based on an assessment of their individual needs. It is carried out at the request of parents or guardians by a support team created by order of the director of the kindergarten or school for a specific child or student. For children and students for whom there are indications that they have special educational needs, the team includes a psychologist, a speech therapist, a resource teacher, and for children and students with hard of hearing or visual impaired, a hearing or speech therapist or a teacher of children and visually impaired students. Additional support for personal development in Bulgaria shall include work with a child and student in a concrete case, psychosocial rehabilitation, hearing and speech rehabilitation, sight rehabilitation, rehabilitation of communicative disturbances and in physical disabilities, provision of accessible architecture, general and specialized supportive environment, technical means, specialized equipment, didactic materials, methods, and specialists, provision of training in the special school subjects for the students with sensory disabilities, resource support.
According to a UNICEF study in Bulgaria, 80% of parents believe that children with learning difficulties suffer because of negative attitudes towards them. The aim of the study was to prove a causal link between the prevailing social norms and the risks of social exclusion and violation of the rights of such children, and to draw attention to the need for a comprehensive early intervention system for children aged 0 to 6 in Bulgaria. Feeling pity toward children with learning difficulties is the prevailing emotion according to the survey. Those children are shunned and often isolated because they are different. In addition to this, 80% of parents of children without disabilities agree that children with disabilities need special educational institutions. What is the situation in Poland? Under the Education Act from 1991, the Polish education system provides adjusted education for every child, appropriate to the age and the level of development, as well as adaptation of content, teaching methods, and organization of work regarding to the psychophysical capabilities, together with psychological and pedagogical support and special forms of teaching. Furthermore, the system provides a chance to receive education in all types of schools by children with learning difficulties or disabilities, according to individual developmental and educational needs and predispositions. In addition to this, care of all pupils with difficulties by allowing for the implementation of individualized educational processes, forms, curriculum, and revalidation. And lastly, early intervention for children with difficulties from the moment of statement of disability to the start of the school.
In Poland, the school education system provides early childhood development support from the time when the child's disability is diagnosed until the time when the child starts school. It is based on an opinion recommending early childhood development support. It is a recommendation type document. As part of the government program offering comprehensive family support for life, which was established in 2017, specialist care is also available to children at risk of developing a disability, in particular children up to 3 and their families. Specialist care includes rehabilitation activities and nursing care. It is provided in the leading coordination rehabilitation care centers based on a medical certificate. There were 320 such centers in 2022. On average, they provide early development support to around 16,500 children and families per year. For pupils with specific learning difficulties, educational requirements based on a curriculum are adapted to their individual developmental and educational needs and psychological and psycho abilities. Such pupils also receive psychological and educational support. Specific learning difficulties are understood as learning difficulties experienced by pupils with normal intellectual abilities, whose problems with learning result from their specific perceptive, physical, and cognitive characteristics that are not related to any neurological problems, and this is according to the Law on School Education, Article 3, Section 33. Specific learning difficulties are diagnosed and confirmed in an opinion by specialists working in a counseling and guidance center.
As for Portugal, the country has improved the conditions for pupils with learning difficulties to access mainstream education and benefit from quality learning. Basic inclusive school principles regarding human rights, equity, and social justice are unquestionable. It is recognized that traditional formal models can lead to segregation and discrimination, which makes social inclusion harder for people with difficulties. Under a law from July 2018, which underlies the creation of a new support structure in each school, called the Learning Support Center. Its objectives are to promote the quality of learner participation in class activities and in other learning contexts, support the teachers of the group or class, support the creation of learning resources and assessment tools for the various components of the curriculum, and finally, develop interdisciplinary intervention methodologies that facilitate learning, autonomy, and adaptation to the school context.
In Portugal, the National Early Intervention System was created to guarantee the necessary development conditions for children up to 6 years of age with physical or functional issues that limit personal growth and participation in typical activities for their age or serious risk of developmental delay. Early childhood intervention is an integrated set of child and family-focused support measures in education, health, and social work. It foresees coordination among the Ministry of Labor, Solidarity and Social Security, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Education, in direct collaboration with families and the community. In Portugal, each school should recognize the diversity of its students and identify ways of dealing with it, adapting the teaching processes to the characteristics and individual conditions of each student, and mobilizing the necessary means to ensure access to the curriculum and to learning. As such, each school should create a multidisciplinary team to support inclusive education made up of permanent members and variable members. Permanent members are a teacher who assists the head teacher, special education teacher, psychologist, and members of the pedagogical council who work as coordinators. And variable members could be the group teacher or the class teacher, depending on the age of the pupil, or the student's form tutor, students, other teachers, or professionals from the Inclusion Resource Center, and other professionals who are somehow involved with the student. This multidisciplinary team is responsible for defining, implementing, monitoring, and assessing support measures.
So what about the situation in Slovenia? In Slovenia, schools have to ensure proper facilities and settings for education of children with learning difficulties, to adapt organization and method of program implementation and provide additional professional support. This also includes the adaptation of the assessment, progression and schedule of lessons. Individualized programs for such children are developed. They specify the objectives and work methods, strategies of inclusion, additional professional support, use of adapted educational technology, physical assistance, and other. And there is also additional professional assistance with the purpose to counsel, help overcome difficulties, and also learning support. Its length depends on whether a child attends a basic school or upper secondary school, and it depends on the child's needs.
The Act regulating the integrated early treatment of preschool children with special needs set out the provision of the integrated early support to family and a SEN child. In so doing, it aims to provide their quality of life. SEN children and children at risk can be identified within the family health system via primary preventive health care and other treatment in kindergarten, educational institution, social care institution, or via services of social work centers. The providers of early treatment are as follows: child development units or clinics, mental health clinics, public kindergartens, and other educational institutions, social care institutions, social work centers, mental care centers, counseling and guidance centers, in cooperation with early treatment centers for preschool children. Kindergartens, basic schools, and upper secondary schools have to ensure proper facilities and settings for education of SEN children, adapt organization and methods of program implementation, and provide additional professional support. They may adapt also the assessment, progression, and learning program. Kindergartens and school together with parents develop individualized programs for SEN children. They specify together the objectives and work methods, strategies of inclusion, additional professional support, use of adapted educational technology, physical assistance, and other adjustments.
Lastly, we have Italy. In Italy, pupils with learning difficulties attend mainstream education at all levels. When a pupil with difficulties accesses the education system, parents submit to the school a specific certification of pupil disability issued by medical committees foreseen by a recent regulation from 2017 in order to receive the specific support measures. This documentation specifies the right to receive specific support and is released by the relevant local office of the National Health System after completion of mandatory investigation procedures. Such students can enroll in upper secondary education until they turn 18, provided they have passed the first cycle leaving exam and have obtained the final qualification. Pupils with specific learning disorders must submit to the school the official certification released by the relevant offices of the national health system.
In Italy, the offer of education for pupils with special educational needs is totally included in mainstream school. School inclusion means that the provision of support measures is mandatory for the state as well as for the local authorities and the national health system, each within its own competences. In fact, the achievement of school inclusion falls under the responsibility of various bodies. Therefore, central regulations foresee that school, local authorities, and local health authorities stipulate agreements to establish collaboration methods for coordinating their activities. The relevant medical committee of the National Health System releases a document that certifies the disability and the consequent right to benefit from the support measures foreseen by the legislation in force. This document is a precondition to start the administrative procedures for school inclusion. Following the disability evaluation, a functioning profile is released according to the criteria of the biopsychosocial model of the International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, ICF, adopted by the World Health Organization. The support measures for pupils with disabilities are then selected on the basis of the functioning profile and the individualized education plan. School can use compensatory educational tools and exempt pupils from some activities upon decisions taken by the class council on the basis of the clinical documentation provided by parents and for pedagogical reasons. Such measures may apply to all pupils with specific learning disorders and/or specific developmental disorders, also through a personalized educational plan. In addition, in order to facilitate the education process of pupils with these types of disorders, teachers and school managers at all levels will receive a specific in-service training. However, classes receiving pupils with specific learning and/or developmental disorders do not have support teachers, contrary to what happens in classes with certified disabled pupils.
So, let's begin our offline quiz. I have a few questions for you regarding learning difficulties. Question 1 is, what are learning difficulties? You have a few seconds to answer the question. So, the answer to the first question is, learning difficulties are a group of disorders involving significant difficulties in the acquisition and use of listening, speaking, reading, writing, reasoning, or mathematical abilities. So, the second question is, what are the types of learning difficulties? The answer to question 2 is the different types of learning difficulties include dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, ADHD, nonverbal learning difficulties, and processing disorders. Question 3. What is dyslexia? The answer to the third question is dyslexia is a learning difficulty that affects a person's ability to read, write, and spell. Question 4. What is dyscalculia? The answer to the fourth question is dyscalculia is a specific learning difficulty that affects a person's ability to understand numbers and learn math facts. Question 5. What is dysgraphia? Answer to the question 5 is dysgraphia is a specific learning difficulty that affects a person's handwriting ability and fine motor skills. Question 6. What is dyspraxia? Answer to question 6. Dyspraxia is a disorder which causes problems with movement and coordination, language, and speech. Question 7. What are nonverbal learning difficulties? Answer to question 7. Nonverbal learning difficulties consist of trouble interpreting nonverbal cues like facial expressions or body language and poor coordination. Question 8. What is ADHD? Answer to question 8. ADHD is a disorder marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and/or hyperactivity and impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. Question 9. What symptoms of ADHD can have an effect on education? Answer to question 9. The symptoms of ADHD that have effects on education may include reduced executive function, hyperactivity, trouble paying attention, disorganization, impulsivity, and lack of attention to detail. Question 10. Where can the definition and the characteristics of learning difficulties be found? Answer to question 10 in DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. Question 11. What type of system dysfunction can explain learning difficulties? Answer to question 11. Central nervous system dysfunction can explain learning difficulties. Question 12. What is the main difference between learning difficulty and learning disability in the educational context? Answer to question 12. Learning difficulties readily respond to intensive educational intervention, while learning disabilities are lifelong and pervasive and do not respond readily to intensive education intervention. Question 13. What is an additional issue that students with learning difficulties face, according to this presentation? Answer to question 13. Students with learning difficulties may have low self-esteem related to their academic performance. Question 14. What can low self-esteem in students with learning difficulties cause? Answer to question 14. Students with low self-esteem tend to be less effective in engaging with others, often leading to difficulties accepting others. They may also feel powerless and have more difficulty coping with the world around them, and they do not feel as though they are in control. Question 15. What are the factors that contribute to the success and well-being of individuals with learning difficulties? Answer to question 15. Factors that contribute to the success and well-being of individuals with learning difficulties are self-awareness, proactivity, perseverance, goal setting, presence and use of effective support systems, effective coping and emotion regulation strategies. Lastly, we have our frequently asked questions. The first question is, what are the causes of a learning difficulty? Answer to the first question. The main causes of learning difficulties are still unknown. However, some believe that it may be a genetic condition, whereas others attribute the condition to factors prevailing at the time of conception and during birth. Second question. How to help a person with a learning difficulty? Answer. The biggest help for individuals with learning difficulties is a supportive environment. Such kids may require special learning centers apart from schools for extra assistance. Resources like calculators, computers, tape recorders, online assistance, and other can make a huge difference in helping such kids understand what they are learning. Third question. Can one outgrow the learning difficulty? Answer. Learning difficulties can stay for life, but it is possible to manage them with right assistance. However, adults with learning difficulties can be as successful as their counterparts without the condition. Fourth question. When should children be screened for a learning difficulty? Answer to the fourth question. In general, it's important to get screened as early as possible so as not to overlook potential problems in a child's learning. Children can be screened for potential learning difficulties as early as preschool, but many parents wait until kindergarten or first grade before undergoing a more comprehensive evaluation. Fifth question. How are learning difficulties treated? Answer. Learning difficulties are treated by adapting the child's environment to better suit their learning style, as well as teaching them techniques to work around their learning problems. Sometimes this can be done without changing the child's academic program or classroom, but often this requires working through a special educational system within the school.
And our sixth question is, what is the most common learning difficulty? And the right answer is reading disability, dyslexia, is the most common learning difficulty, representing at least 80% of all learning difficulties. And question number 7 is, can people with learning difficulties be successful in life? And the answer of our question number 7 is, some individuals don't realize they have learning difficulties until they are adults. With the right support and interventions, however, children and adults with learning disabilities and difficulties can succeed in school and life, recognizing, accepting and understanding your learning difficulty are the first step to success. And the last question, are there any famous people with learning disabilities and learning difficulties? And the answer of our last question is yes, there are many famous people with learning difficulties. Some of them are Orlando Bloom, Tom Cruise, Justin Timberlake, Jay Leno, Keira Knightley, John Lennon, Jennifer Aniston, Keanu Reeves, Vince Vaughn, Jamie Oliver, Pablo Picasso, Mozart, Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Alexander Bell, Magic Johnson, Carl Lewis, Michael Phelps, Winston Churchill, Benjamin Franklin, Walt Disney, Steven Spielberg. Thank you for participating in our webinar, and please take a moment to answer a few evaluation questions. How would you rate the overall webinar experience? How would you rate the content of the webinar? Would you improve the content and how? Some suggestions?
Thank you.
Would you recommend this webinar to your colleague or friend? Why?
Thank you for attending this webinar. Have a nice day.